but I think we really, thank you. I think we really will need more than a half hour. My 2 cents. Go ahead.
I think story mapping is usually, I don't know, I think it's maybe at like the PM or like everyone level. This is a question for everyone. I'm kind of confused. Is the confusion around user stories, or however we want to say it, issues, like the feature we're building, and like how different items fit within the roadmap? Or is the confusion around how the actual user would navigate through the UI that we're proposing? Like, what can we kind of expand on the confusion? Because one would be a story map, and then one would just be, excuse me, I am losing my voice. One would be user flows. So do we just want to know how a user would like kind of enter and leave through a proposed design, for example? Or are we confused about like what it is that we need to start working on the issue level? What do y'all think?
This was exactly my question last week as well.
I think it's an important distinction because, yeah, we did get MVC1 fleshed out. We did all the stories that were needed to try to get it to the smallest thing. So that is a good question to the rest of the team. I think it's the navigating around part and like how the flow goes, but I'll let everyone else jump in.
Yeah, my vote is for at least to start off with like a user journey. So the navigation flow that a user would go through for essentially work items globally, and then maybe individual work items also. Oh, actually, you're asking not the second question, the first question. So yeah, more the journey around around work items. So navigating around versus the MVC.
And journey, what do you mean by journey, Donald? Do you mean like literal, like how do I get from step A to B? Or do you mean journey as in like, here's this large journey, oh, they need to create a thing. They need to create a work item, and then they need to edit a work item? Or is it like, while the user is creating the work item, they need to do this to create it? Which is it, the first or the second? I don't know.
Both. So I think that would be defined in this session. Like at a high level, we would list off everything that a user could do, and then for each of those actions, we would kind of drill in or dive into the journey that they would take to get to that and each of those end results.
I think it's a bit of both, actually, like a bit of the high level and a bit of the details, because like we do have the new issue. Does that button stay in place, or does it get replaced with a new work item? So that's a detail thing, right? Because we know how we get to the issues list, but then what does the button say next? Then I guess depending, like from there, then you kind of have a lot of this branching out going on in my head, because then if you have a new item on the issues list, if you have a new work item on the issues list, you create this work item, then what gets displayed on the list itself? Do we display only that type of the item that was just created, or everything, and that pops up at the top? So I think like these kind of smaller details, I guess. But then like the biggest question for me is like, where does the user find this new work item button? Is it like a totally separate list? Is it on the issues list from the issues menu?
So I think you're describing kind of like the user flow,
Yeah.
Alex. Like, okay, we know we want to create a thing, for example, but how do you create it? Like, what are all the little steps? What are the edge cases, etc.? Right? Is that kind of, am I on track?
Yeah, probably not into all the edge cases. I would be interested in one simple flow, like here's where it starts, here are the steps that user needs to take, and then here's where they land, or where they see the result, kind of thing. So like it can be in highlight, like in big lines, but also like describing the journey in a more specific way, if that makes sense.
To me,
Yeah, that
that
makes a
sounds
lot of
more like a user flow. And I think one of the reasons, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, but I think one of the reasons that Alexis was looking for confirmation is because, or clarification is because when UX thinks of a journey, I think we tend to think of a journey map, which is something where you document at a high level the user's experience kind of through a specific flow, and you're outlining like the emotional aspects of the journey and key touch points and things like that, but it's not super focused on the granular details of the how. It's more like the what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think a user flow is what we're actually looking for, which I had started a simple mural on that, and I posted it down here, but it's very basic right now, but it could be something we could build on if it would be helpful.
I'm going to verbalize mine, even though it's a little bit weird in 1G, but I think we need a way to, just from a big picture, from the main menu. Right now, we just have issues and epics, and they're in different spots. If we can just visualize like how that menu scales with different types of work items and rollouts, that might help as well, so that maybe every new work item gets its own rollout off of work items as a base. And maybe there's another rollout to go right to new or to view them. That might also help us just for the MVC to have a place to navigate around if the menu adapts that way. And that way it can grow. When our customers add new types, they would immediately populate that menu too.
Do you have an issue for that, Kristen? Because I think
Not yet.
you have a lot of good ideas. I just want to make sure you
My head.
Yeah. And you should draw out all the things, because I know you're visual.
Yeah. But that I think might help us, because if then we'd be navigating to the list page, to the new form, it would get us around a lot of these. And then we could have the other questions like what Alex was saying, like when you're on that list page, what gets populated in the template from the actual work types metadata, like its title, does that get into each add button and the title of the page, and like all the questions we have to figure out. And
I mean, okay, that leads into my next point, Kristen. You already did a great job kind of mapping out some of this flow, not the flow, I guess kind of the journey, if I'm using the language that y'all are using, of the user here, and mapping out the stories in the spreadsheet. So do you think we need to just expand on that, or do y'all want to start over mapping in another way? Do we need to keep mapping? What's the feeling? Because we have y'all seen the spreadsheet that Kristen created recently? I'll just share my screen. So like this one that we worked on a while ago. Is this kind of the more high level thinking that y'all were referencing, and that would be helpful? Because this could be just something we perhaps update.
Yeah, we only imported the MVC1 over into GitLab, so that's all in our MVC1 issue, but the hierarchy stories are there, the comments, the parody, all of it.
Yeah, I get all that. I think for me, well, and if I'm confused, I'm sure it's also maybe where some others are confused, is just like the user flow is in like where it's clear what a work item detail is going to be and what it can do and what parenting is going to be on that. Like that's all. I think that's pretty straightforward, but it's like we have this track that was already started for like types and issue types and some of that things. And so like, what does it look like in the end state from a list standpoint? Like if we get all the way down the road where people can create their own types and they can define their own relationships between the types and that sort of thing, like what does that look like, I guess? And how do we iteratively work towards that, right? Because right now it sounds like we're talking about like building a whole new list experience and like all these things like out of the gate. Which if that's what we need to do, we can, but there's also, is there a way to iterate in smaller pieces to get to the end state while shipping customer value, I guess is the question.
I think you're right on. And like, we're getting into details and finer points, which I think should be more like vision. And then we could iterate and ship something that's way more simple in the meantime, just to prove the concept and then make it better as we go. So potentially that rollout menu wouldn't make sense, but we could just hard code for now, just the items in it, and hard code everything essentially just to get the MVC up. But
Well,
I
I
do
guess,
wants to see the big picture so they kind of know it's coming.
yeah, so that's just where if we think about avoiding, if possible, like a bunch of different list views. Like we have so many, like
Yeah, we should have
we have a
one.
list, yeah, one list view, and maybe you can, and that's where like what I was working towards before we start on this with the issue type is you basically have one list view for issues or which will be future work items. You can filter by type, and then when you build out the save queries and filtering, then like people can build out their own list experience with whatever types they want to, right?
Could
So
this
yeah, I think it's
be-
just,
But we just don't want to bloat MVC 1 to have all the things. That's just my only.
oh yeah,
Definitely. Like we may need to have them all in tandem to start, right? Like epics, issues, and then this new one. And then gradually we'll migrate onto the new one. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's just where there's the confusion is like what is the MVC for this look like? And then what does the finish state look like? Even if it is vision, I think that's where the engineers were asking for a little bit of clarity. Like, how do we iteratively roll this out to get from where we are today to where we want to be in 6-12 months from now? Not that we have to have all that solved, but I think that's what I got from the user flow quote,
Yeah, I think that's right. I think and apologies to the UX folks for like, I'm sure using the wrong language several times over the course of this ask, because it's just like you have very specific definitions. Thank you, by the way, Blair, for providing some of those links so I can read up on what all these things actually are. But what Gabe said of like, we have point A now, right? We have issues, and we are kind of, from an engineering perspective, we're iteratively shaping issues to be work items. So and then eventually, like, end state, we have a really nice work items list that's filterable. But as we get into this MVC where we have to actually start flipping some of the switches so that issues are work items, what do things look like? Like, what is the, do we keep using the existing issue list and we need to add filters for it, or do we have a new list? I guess that's, and Donald, maybe from the front end perspective, like, I think it's probably more relevant, but like, what does that transition state look like, so that we can do it without making a horrible user experience, I guess.
That makes sense. And I would say too, just for hearing that, like, we're not going to redesign the issue lists right now. I think we should spend all of our energy on the new modal or the new list view, or sorry, the detail view of work items, and use what we have, but make them work like filtering if we have to. This was another spreadsheet. I know we started at the very start, but it's kind of where we are now. So we have this new work item view existing. There would be issue, epics, requirements, test cases, all with their own. Eventually we needed to add this new one for adding new objects, as well as, this is what we're talking about now, but like a combined list view that can handle the new object. So that discussion of what needs to be on that combined list view, or the one that can work for all of our new work item objects, that's, I guess, what we're getting into right now. I think like it should just be our normal UI that we have for the list view. I don't want to personally invest in the redesign of that, but it does need to work for the new object type. That's just my opinion. I'm sure the rest of the team also has insight there.
That's one of the things that I brought up when we were talking about the schema for work items and how like widgets were going to work. And like, does the front end ask for a schema of all the widgets that are on a given type of a work item type or whatever? Because that also can play into the list view in terms of like populating the tokens that are in the search experience, the bulk edit stuff that's in the sidebar. And I think that's where it would be great to just to think about the UX and the user flows there, even if we don't work on it right now, but just thinking through it and like sort of, I don't know if you've seen the incremental and iterative Mona Lisa idea where you kind of take both iterative and incremental approach to like painting the picture, right? You know, sketch it all out and then you start filling it in with different colors, different spots. I think we just sort of need to take that approach where you have like this broad stroke of an outline of things, and then we can start to iteratively like fill it in as we have questions from a UX and kind of vision standpoint. That's my 2 cents.
You think we can do that, Gabe, with the approach we're kind of taking with a new greenfield item as the first item? So like we work on features first, and as we're building out features, that's kind of the broad non-detailed approach to work items. Once we get to a place where we're satisfied with that first MVC, that first level, then we start filling in more of the picture as we're also migrating some of the other work items like issues and epics into that work item structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's possible because we can build iteratively and incrementally, and it's just depending on when we want to expose things to the end users, right? And I think that's the sort of like trying to decouple this a little bit of like, we'll ship it to customers when as soon as we can, as soon as there's something that is valuable that we can ship. But I do think we can kind of take it in this sort of like iterative approach. And I think if I come back to all of this in MVC1, there was the ask to create a new work item. So if we're like going from high level all the way back to the MVC1, creating a new feature, how do you do it? I think that's where some of the confusion was, because like we have a new UX view that Holly put together for creating a new work item. But where do you actually initiate clicking new work item? So we can either decide to say like, we're just going to call them issues in the UI for right now, like the thing that we're building, and then we can change issue to work item at some point whenever it's ready. Because that way, like you still have like it sort of removes some of those like questions, because then you just click the new issue button, and then we have to figure out how to let you make sure that it's a feature. But there's also going to be other types of issues as well, like bugs. And
that's where my confusion is as well, is like, how do these two coexist? The existing issues and epics and all that stuff, like, right, we have create issue lists, and then we are adding the feature, which feels like it's something greenfield that we want to kind of build from scratch. And now I do feel like we do have two separate UIs. I don't know how to phrase it, so to make myself clear, that like you cannot like my feeling is that we'll not be able to reuse the UI for the issues, for create new issue, for issue lists, for the feature itself, right? Because like you need this new button, you'll create a new feature that will only have 2 or 3 or 4 attributes on it, and then you'll need to display, like then we're talking that we'll have that detailed view that will also show only a couple of fields, so you'll not be able to backfill a lot of this stuff. So how does that then fit into the issue list? When you'll go back into the issue list, you'll basically see everything, because that's an issue, I guess. Like what I'm trying to say is, like in old UI, a feature will still be shown as an issue, and you'll see everything on it, right? Does that make sense? Because this is where I'm not sure how the two coexist, basically. This transition period when you don't have everything ready for the work items and you have the issues still there, how the two things coexist? Is that okay to go into the issue list and view the feature in the issue details, and it will basically show as an issue? Or do we start actually changing the issue view to satisfy the new types, to show the type to show all other stuff on the issue detail page, for instance, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
I think it's okay if both show, as long as we could modify the query as well on the main issue list page and remove the feature work items if we kind of put that in a sandbox. Ideally though, I know epics are completely separate, but I don't want like the epic users to be confused about their current business objects and the things that they're using. But I would love to greenfield the new objects so that we could go iteratively and only have certain things show on the list page or on as we build them. I'm okay though if features end up in that issue list, because I think our usage will be small if we can't filter them out.
Are you worried about differentiating the two things in the UI, or just how a user would access and test it out, Alex? Or both?
Yeah, I just want to understand what our expectations are. If we are okay having every single type in there, like the features and whatever else we're moving towards, because we will be eventually adding the requirements and so on and so forth. So if we are okay mixing in everything in the lists, that's fine with me. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand that, and we are all on the same page, and the expectations are not that, well, we expect it to behave in a different way kind of thing. Because like, again, we're still to design a simpler UI. I'm just not sure how the two coexist.
So this one should be greenfield, the new combined list, or we could call that new feature list. That's the one that would be modified in the future to show any work item type that's defined, but we're starting with feature. So that one should be scalable in that sense. Eventually, if I define 6 work item types, they could all use that code.
I think that's where some of my confusion was coming from, is that like after MVC4, work items will have all the same features, fields, whatever is the current issue view, right? So even if we haven't migrated epics at that point, you can replace the current issue detail view with the new work item view. So like
This one.
Yeah, with that one, right? And so we added filter by type on the issue list right now, like because there are incidents and they want to be able to filter boards by incidents and regular issues. So like the new combined list, it, like in my opinion, it already exists because it.
So you're saying take this and upgrade it.
Well, I'm just saying we don't need to build a new greenfield list. We just need to iterate on the issue list to be whatever we want it to be in the future, because it already can filter by type, or we'll be able to this milestone.
Yeah.
So you could go in, you could say, I want to see only features, right?
So it's
or I
okay
wanna see-
as like by default, it's okay for the issue list to just show everything, right?
The reason why we broke it off is so we didn't have to necessarily have this conversation this early of the migration and supporting current customers, so we could go out faster. But I think what we're saying as a team now is that we do just want to iterate and support people in one world, at least off the lists.
I would, because we can put the new detail
This-
view behind a feature flag.
Right. And I was thinking we would put this behind a feature flag in the menu where you're navigating to this new green field that uses modals or other things we're testing, and we don't mess with our current customer.
So are we suggesting that we would have the issues list, and this would be an item that you could create from the issues list page or filter from the issues list page, but the issues list page would be sort of that initial touch point for the user to create and interact with the feature work item? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, because we wanted to add default issue types.
My only
Right.
concern is that I don't want for the user to have an expectation that a feature is a type of issue, as opposed to it being a new thing that could be a feature, if that makes sense. So if I'm understanding correctly, that we would propose that these two things would go out at the same, they would coexist in this way, That would be my only concern is I wouldn't want for the user to immediately make an association that this new thing is a type of issue when that wouldn't be the case.
Well, eventually we're gonna have to tell the users the issues are work items.
I
Right.
feel like
Like,
it would
if
be
that's
better
the-
to introduce them to work items and then have
Yeah.
features and these other types as an aspect of that. I'm afraid it'll set a precedence with the user from the start that this new thing is a type of issue, as opposed to introducing a new thing and features being a type of that thing.
But why?
But
why
it's
can't
not
we
technically
start-
anything.
Why can, like, I think I've raised
But it
it,
is.
I've raised this last time as well, but why can't we have a totally different navigation for the work items and just do it from there? And then from there, we have, instead of new issue, we will always have new work item. And then we will display just less information there for the time being because it's MVC. We will do all this crazy stuff and we can always, just because it's the kind of feature flag, we either show everything that we have or we hide everything that we have, or even have both the issues and the work items. I guess there will be some confusion because those are basically the same thing, but you can have customers try one and the other at the same time and kind of get feedback from there. I don't know, like my biggest concern is having them both, the issues and the work items in the nav, which will, I think, create confusion. But if we can do something with the UI and say that this is under development, this is, I don't know, whatever text there goes. And then you basically have a new blank sheet to just start
Yes.
the new stuff there.
That's been my vote from the start, is just like get us into a greenfield where we can just try all these UIs together, try parenting, try everything in its own nav
like
item. That's behind
building
it.
building on top of the issues. I feel like there is a lot of the, like, I understand that we want to reuse code, but I think we can reuse code either way, right? It's just a bit more work. Well, I don't know how much because I'm not a front ender and UXer, but it's more code because we need to add this new stuff, the navigation bar, the all those new things, but I don't know.
Kristen, were you seeing like a, for example, just like a rough idea, like a work items nav item, like under issues, for example, and then that would lead to just like a
Yes.
rough list?
That would
Okay.
be below issues or in the nav behind a feature flag, so not everyone would see it, but we could play with rollouts and like hit the list view, hit whatever views we wanted from an engineering standpoint and have a bit of time to get it right. And it could eventually be spawned from the work item types themselves, but we could MVC with just a hard-coded link to the list view or whatever we needed for that particular release.
Just to make it clear, like it will add a bit of a work on the back end, right? Because we will need to add a new controller. We'll need to have this kind of few endpoints, but most of the code is still being reused. Like we will reuse the services. We can by default filter only the feature items, right? Because this is something new. We don't interfere with the user experience. We don't interfere with what user expects. So we can play around with a lot of the stuff there. I think is just safer. It does add a little bit of work, I think, on top. But yeah, I'll let everyone else to express their opinion on that. I think that's easier to understand and safer, at least from my perspective, because I was struggling a lot to try and understand how do we fit everything in together on the existing items.
I just want to note that we're at time, just in case anybody
Yes,
has.
we're at time. I can stay longer, but I understand if anyone has to drop.
I think this is really good discussion personally, but it does sound like we need to dig a little deeper into some of this even still.
And isn't there a discussion somewhere about rolling out work items, like how to roll them out? I thought I saw something.
Initially, we were discussing around that sheet and just that there would be like a migration point where everyone starts using the new one that goes from being the greenfield test area to having it render all different types, including issues. but even if we make this greenfield area, we can still readdress, like figure out what is the right way to roll it out, whether everything moves back onto the old one at some point. But if
I think-
it feels like we're moving towards the new combined list view.
Yeah, I think we just need to think about it from a customer experience standpoint, largely, right? And also like the pros and cons of if we do the greenfield thing, like how much does that delay us being able to incrementally ship customer value at some point, or like what is a transition point where we switch issues over to the new work item detail view, like. And I think that's where one of the things, just recapping this discussion thus far, it's clear that we need to make a decision on how we roll out work items, because I think that impacts things. So let's open up an issue to discuss that async. I think we need a DRI from product UX and engineering. So I would like to collaborate on it. I don't have to be the DRI, but does anybody want to volunteer?
I'm happy to volunteer for UX. And to create the issue, if that would be helpful.
I think we need a fun front end as well on there, just to make sure, because some of these things we're talking about, like just adding a stubbing in a front end navigation item, how much work is that? That will be a big part of the question.
Yeah, so start off with having me as a DRI for engineering. And then
The other thing to
put it
consider
on.
too is we haven't really even talked about flexible URLs and tracking, and I know that's going to happen, but if we don't have this in a greenfield, we're going to affect URLs for everybody immediate. And so in my head all along, it had been greenfield and we had a new URL structure on this. We had new tracking, and then eventually we merged over onto that new world. But there's a lot to hold up behind the scenes if we do start modifying things like URLs right out of the gates.
Okay, so Donald, front end. See, I guess Kristen, do you want to do our product, or you want me to do it? I'd really like, we just need to have a pros and cons list for both approaches.
I think we should both be in on this.
Okay, well, we can share it.
Yeah. It's
I can help with the back end if there is a need for that as well. So
and yeah, our goal should be to think long-term for our customers good, but also think, how do we get the embarrassing MVC up ASAP, even if we have to go back and change things?
without affecting anyone.
Yeah, like get it into a box where we can actually demo this to somebody and not mess with our customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you creating that issue then, Gabe?
You volunteered, but I mean,
No. I just wanted to confirm because I wasn't sure if you were saying that you were going to. I'm happy to do it.
How about we reuse this one, because I opened it and I never did anything with it. This one we can just update the title because it's pretty empty. So I will take the first stab at drafting the first description.
We're at the 6-month mark of this project now too. Just overall, we did a bunch of design for the beginning. So I do really want to like get something up we can show.
Yeah, me too. Okay, cool. I think that's the recap. Sorry, we didn't get to the other items. Does anybody else need to vocalize anything from those 4, 5, 3?
Maybe if we should schedule another session for Alexis's story mapping session. I'll talk to her offline and see if she wants to schedule something for us all to walk through.
Maybe we could do one on Thursday or something.
Yeah.
And also, Donald, you're the DRI for that.
Okay, cool. Blair, I may have missed with all the craziness that's been happening. I don't know if you've been introduced yet in any of our meetings. Maybe you have, and I just missed it. But if not, welcome.
Thank you.
And you are
I don't
the
know
new
if I've
product
been
design
introduced or
manager.
not.
Okay, so just to make sure I have it right, you're the new product design manager for Plan and only Plan,
Manage.
maybe? I am
Plan
Manage.
and
Okay.
manage.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, well, welcome. Nice to
Oh,
have
okay.
you.
thank you.
Lord, welcome.
I've been introduced so many times, I forget like who, I know just about everybody here, so maybe I've been introduced, but hello, thank you for bringing that up.
Glad to
I
have
don't
you.
want to, what was that, Kristen?
Glad to have you on the team.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here. You guys are tackling some big old crusty initiatives, so the more people, the merrier, and the more questions, the better. You guys should eat lunch though, right? If you're in a similar time zone to me, maybe breakfast for some of you, maybe dinner for others.
It's still lunch for me. It's just at dinner time.
Okay.
Busy day.
Just to make it confusing, let's do that too. Let's just shift. I'll have breakfast. Why not?
Cool. All right. I'll talk to
Uh,
Alexis about the separate session. Sorry, Gabe. Do you have something else you wanted to say before we?
I was just gonna say bye to everyone and hang up
Okay.
because we're 8 minutes over and it feels like we're like breaking a law or doing something horribly wrong. So
We're not.
All
All
It's
right,
good to
bye
chat
everyone.
to
Have a
you.
great Wednesday.
Thanks, Gabe.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.